Kind of related to that is continuous integration. If you're not doing that on your project now, you should immediately. This is the number one thing, if you're not doing it now, that will make your life so much better. Because continuous integration is basically creating a standalone build machine that proves that you can build it away from any one person's machine. This gets you away from this, but it works on my machine thing forever, because a continuous integration machine is the only official build of the project, and if it happens to work on your machine, that's good for you, but until it works on that machine, it's not official yet. And it does the most important thing you need to do all the time, continuously. Not just doing builds and running tests, but also generating metrics, generating documentations like schema documentation, that sort of stuff. So it's a really have around. Version control. Now, I'm assuming everyone here is using version control. If you're not, see me after the talk. There's a special 12-step program we can get you in to get you on some nice free version control that'll make your life better. But the reason I put it here is because even on projects with version control, I still see lots of commented out code. If you have version control, you have a time machine. Get rid of all that commented out code. Now, I know the motivation. Well, I don't want to delete this because I might need it later to figure out what it does. Get rid of it. You've got a time machine if you have version control. Get rid of all that stuff that's making your code ugly, and you can always go back in the past and get it if you want. And I mentioned this before, documentation. Have your continuous integration server generate documentation for you, like SQL schemas. There's a tool called Schema Spy that does that for you, that'll generate a nice ER diagram for you, a class diagrams, whatever documentation you need. The more you can generate automatically, the less you have to worry about it. I have several different categories of developer tools for automation here. One of them are don't build things you don't have to build that you can just go get. And a good example of that is this project called Buildix, which is an open source project that was spawned originally from ThoughtWorks London, which is, we call it infrastructure in a box. It is a live CD or an Ubuntu installation, so you can either just put the live CD in and boot it, or you can put the CD in and install Ubuntu from it. And what it does, from a blank machine, once you install it, it gives you a Subversion repository that's already set up, cruise control, already configured to use that Subversion repository, track for bug tracking, and mingle for requirements gathering. So literally in the amount of time it takes to put in a CD and install Ubuntu, which is about 10 minutes, you have project infrastructure up and running. You can start checking into the Subversion repository. It'll automatically pick those things up and build them and run tests and all that other stuff for you. The second category is subverting other tools. Tools that are meant to do one thing, but you can kind of bend them to do what you want to do. And a great example of that is Selenium. Now, Selenium is a testing tool for web applications that is designed for QA level testing of web applications, where you're literally clicking through a page. It's an open source tool, but that's not what I'm going to use it for, because Selenium has a side project called the Selenium IDE, which is a Firefox plugin. You don't even have to have Selenium on your machine to install the Selenium IDE, and once you do that, it allows you to record your interaction with a website and then play it back. So here's the scenario. You've got a wizard-style web application that has 5 pages, and you've got the pages done and debugged and working, and you're working on the 4th page. The problem is you have to get through the first 3 pages to try to debug the 4th page. And you've got all the validations and all that stuff working on the first 3 pages, which is why your testing database has Fred Flintstone and Homer Simpson and that ASDF guy, because you learn the shortest possible route through those pages to get to the one where you need to work on it. But that's all just wasted time. What Selenium lets you do is record that interaction. Now, I know you always think, well, this is the last time I have to do it because I'm sure I fixed this bug, but it's never the last time. You always have to do it again. So here's how this works. This is what the Selenium IDE looks like. You just start it up, and you can click on record and start recording stuff. And here's an actual demonstration of that. So this is a little toy e-commerce website, and you'll see it off screen in just a second. I'm going to start up the Selenium IDE, which is right there. It comes up in record mode, and now I can start interacting with this web application, and it's recording all the things that I do in this web application. So let's say that the credit card processing is the thing I have to check here, and it only fails when I have 2 things in the cart. So I can come along here and record my interaction with this guy, and then finally fill in the last details and check out. Now I can stop the recorder and then just click on the run button, and it'll run back through that as fast as possible. That is a huge time saver if you can record your interaction for the stuff you don't care about. You don't care about the first 3 pages. That's just something you have to get through to get to the thing that you're actually interested in. Selenium IDE saves this stuff as HTML. So it's kind of like fit or fitness in that way. But you can also take this little test that you recorded and export it as an actual Java JUnit test and run it from a command line. Or if you'd rather, you can save it as Ruby. Selenium supports a whole bunch of different languages. It supports Java, C#, Ruby, Python. Even if you're in a bad mood one day, Perl. You can have it exported as Perl. But it gives you an automated interaction with a web application. Record your interaction the first time you walk through the pages. This can cut hours off debugging time because you don't have to go through the same stuff over and over and over again, which is just wasted time. Selenium has basically defined an interaction API for web applications, and it's also really useful to cut down on bad conversations with your QA department. Because if they can record the bug and just send it to you, you can play it and see what they did to actually generate that bug. Don't spend time doing by hand what is better automated. But the last category of these is building your own tools. And that's something that I don't think developers do enough of, because you almost never do anything just once. You should try to work like a craftsman, not a laborer. A laborer is someone who does the same repetitive things over and over. A craftsman solves problems, like building shims and jigs, which are engineering terms for little temporary tools. Building a tool takes a little longer than brute force, but you build assets. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. This is a little bit of bash foo. I do a lot of stuff with Subversion, and you can add stuff to Subversion repository in Windows using something like Tortoise SVN. But the problem is it's very mouse-centric, there's a lot of clicking around and that kind of stuff. So one day I created this little bash script, one-liner, to do this for me. And basically what this does is when you do Subversion status, it gives you the status and then a tab and then the file name. And the new files always start with a question mark. So I do Subversion status, and then I just get the ones that have a question mark at the beginning of the line, and then I get rid of the question mark, and then I get rid of that first space, so now I'm left with just the file names. And this line handles embedded spaces in my file names, which comes up sometimes, and then the whole thing gets pumped xargs svn add. This is the way I add stuff to Subversion now. I don't do it any other manual way. And I've done this thousands of times since I created this little snippet. In the Productive Programmer book, I show examples of lots and lots of different scripting tricks. Bash and PowerShell and a bunch of others. Lots of different languages and tools. But now the question becomes, which one do I use for a particular problem? I have a particular problem, and you look over at your bookshelf, and there's this whole zoo of big-eyed O'Reilly animals looking at you, trying to decide which one of those guys to use. I think you should use a real language for solving these kinds of problems. And by real language, I mean Ruby or Groovy or Python or Perl or something that has real language stuff, not Sed or Awk or one of those guys, and here's why. We had a problem on one of our projects. We had a 38,000 line SQL file, and we needed it in 1,000 line chunks because we were building this lightweight parser for it. But each chunk had to be syntactically correct. The guy I was sitting with, pairing with, said, I think we could probably do that by hand in about 10 minutes. And I told him, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to automate it instead. And after about 50 minutes, we had this. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but this is a little Ruby code that goes through and does that work.